Hi everybody, it's time for Monday Musings again, and I want to share a technique with you today that I just have fallen in love with. It's out of a magazine called Paintworks. See if I can get that to you. Paintworks. And it's an older issue because they're now tragically out of print. This is from August of 2013. And the design is by Cheryl Poulin, and this is her design. It is a box of coasters. This is how the box of coasters began, like this. There's 6 coasters and the box, wooden box. This is not quite the same box that she used, because as you can see, hers is a little bit more detailed on the top, but it works. So I wanted to take you through this step by step with her technique for coloring, and I also want to show you the finished product. Here is one of the coasters finished, and here also is the box. And I'll put some pictures in here for you. This was just so much fun. It's so much fun. So what I did is I took the coasters in steps, and I thought that I would go through each step with you. So, okay, let me put this back down a little bit so that we don't have a light shine on there. So this is, well, actually it's not the first step. Okay. The first step is to, and I saved the back of the coaster box to show you. The first step is to use gesso, just to slap a coat on there, and just, you know, it's not really thick on there. You can still see some of the wood in there. But so I did that, and then the next step, after that is dried, is to add more gesso. Now I'm using just a really cheap gesso brand. It's Artist Loft from Michael's, and it's cheap. But I decided to use this because I wanted a goopy looking textured surface. So that's what you get with this cheap stuff. So I'm just using an old brush, and as you can see, this is really kind of goopy. Let's see, I'm having some trouble with my light there. There you go, kind of goopy. And I'm just going to take it and put it on here. And, oh gosh, the light. Let's see if I can straighten up just a little bit. Let me pull my light source away. Okay. Maybe that will help. Alright. So I'm just slapping it on there. And I'm making a thick coat. I want it to stand up. Then her directions next call for the use of a paper cup. And I didn't have a paper cup, so I used what I have. And just let me get that on there the rest of the way. Okay, so it's all on there. It's thick and goopy, and okay. So, wait, let me put this in the water. My brush in the water. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I took a little plastic cup that I have. It's about the size of a paper cup. And then you're just going to stick that cup, the rim of it, on there and make impressions. See? And I'm going to overlap some of them as well. Okay? Yeah, I'm going to put one right there. Alright, so that's what you do. And then you let that air dry. Well, I guess you could use your hairdryer on it if you wanted, or your heat gun if you wanted. but it takes a while, and you really might as well just let it air dry and go off and do something else for a day or for a couple hours, however long it takes, depending on how thick you get this. Okay, so then my next step, after this is dried, and I'll put that all out of the way, and I'm using, she had a list of fluid acrylics, and I have a lot of the DecoArt Media acrylics, but I only had 3 that were on her list, and that was cyan magenta, no, sorry, primary magenta, cyan is blue, primary magenta, and white, and then the violet interference. So I used what I had. I also, she needed yellow, and I had this brand of the yellow fluid media, so I'm using it. And then the other one, the red iron oxide, transparent red iron oxide, I didn't have, so I'm just using what I do have, and that is DecoArt Traditions. But I also have some golden acrylic flow release, and I have that diluted with water 10:1. So I use that. So this is what I was going to use to thin out my paint. And then it also calls for Payne's Gray, which I didn't have, so I mixed my color. I mixed 3 parts of ultramarine blue with 1 part of carbon black and made my Payne's Gray. And I have that over here just chilling in a wet palette, waiting for me to need to use it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull my light back over just a little bit. Alright, so what I did was I waited for this to dry. It cracks a little bit when it dries because it was goopy. I've got some of these things here and little grungies, and I don't care because I wanted that, because I want there to be a lot of weird texture. And here's the places right here where I did my cup. Okay, so then my first step was to slip slap some of this gold acrylic on the fluid acrylic, yellow fluid acrylic on, and that's what I've done. And then her instructions were to air dry this, or to heat dry this one, which I did. Okay, so the next step was to take the transparent red iron oxide and some alcohol, and I have some alcohol in a bottle where I can drip it out, and it's rubbing alcohol, and I have some alcohol in a spray where I can spray it on as well. So here's our step 2, and I'm going to show you how to do it on this tile. Okay, so I'm going to get a clean sheet of palette paper over here, and I'm going to put down my Traditions transparent red iron oxide. There we go. Just putting a little bit out there. I'm going to spray it a little bit with my acrylic flow release so that it's wet. And I'm going to take a wash brush okay, and I'm going to, I'm going to slip slap this over top of my coaster. If you don't have the flow medium, you can also just use water to make it wetter, thinner, okay? And then without hesitating, I'm going to spray my alcohol on there. And you see what it starts to do? It starts to drip and move and change. And then I can drip my alcohol and see how that changes. Okay, and then you let this air dry. You do not heat dry it. Okay, that's what you get. That's what this tile is, okay? Or this coaster is. So, here's my air dried piece of the step we just did. And the instructions say to do it again, to repeat it. So I'm going to take, over here on my palette paper, I've got my red iron oxide. Whoops, I just sprayed it with alcohol. That's not cool. Let's spray it with the flow release and some water. And let's see, let me find, okay. Dip it in some water and wet this, and it's already got some alcohol in it, so let's see how that happens, how that reacts. So I'm taking this and I'm just going to slap right over top of it again, where, you know, this is our second coat on it. Without hesitating, I'm going to take this alcohol, spray it on there, watch it react, do some of this dripping, this stuff, and I'm just going to turn it around and around and watch it move. And I'm going to set it aside also to air dry. Okay? So we come up on our next one, our next coaster. I'm so glad that I was able to do this. There's 6 coasters. So here's my coaster, dried, that has the 2 coats of the transparent red iron oxide on there. Alright? So our next one, hang on, let me go back to my other tile, because I'm doing these so that I can finish up my coaster set, so I want to make sure I get them right. Okay, so here it is with the 2 coats of transparent red iron oxide. Here is my coaster that has the next step on it, using the primary magenta in the exact same way. So, I'm going to put this out on here, and I don't need to add the flow release because this is the fluid. And I'm putting it on my palette paper. I'm going to rinse my brush. But I'm going to have a really wet brush because I want this to be very wet, like a washy consistency. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to put a real quick coat of this primary magenta on here. I'm going to immediately pick up the alcohol, do some spraying, see how that starts to react. And I really like the big drips, so and I hold it about a foot above. And if I feel like I've got too much paint on there, too much, you know, going on, I just blot it with my paper towel, and I come back with that alcohol and let it work itself around. If you don't like what you're getting, go ahead and blot it, put some more back on, and let that alcohol do its job. And set it off to air dry. Okay, I've got written on the back of these steps. So here I am, back again, with my 2 coats of transparent red iron oxide and my my primary magenta, and it has air dried. So my next step then is to get out my Payne's Gray. Let me check, because I almost forgot one step when I was doing this. Okay. Yeah, I need to get out my Payne's Gray. So let's get this out. And I'm going to get my same brush. And now, this time, I'm going to take water and spray it on top of my tile. Okay, water this time, not alcohol. I'm going to take some of my Payne's Gray, and I'm going to pick up this tile, and I'm going to paint this Payne's Gray along the top, and I'm going to lift it up and let it drip. Ah! Okay, and if it's not wet enough to drip the way I want it to, or if it doesn't drip fast enough, you just spray it again and watch it go. Play with that a little bit till you get it going, get where you want it to go, get enough of it on there. If you don't have enough, just stick some in there in the middle and spray it with water and tip it around and let it move. Alright? There you go. So you're going to let that dry, air dry. And here's what we have. There's one more step in there. Once this step dried, then I took a baby wipe, or just take alcohol on a paper towel. But I took a baby wipe because it's the same thing. But just to show you here, I put some alcohol on the paper towel. And then I found my circles, and then I took it and I wiped out my circles. I wiped off the transparent Iron Oxide paint and the magenta and the Payne's Gray, and wiped it back on those circles so that we see the yellow again. And if you happen to wipe it back too far to where it looks white, like back to the gesso, then all I did, and I did do this on a couple, all I had to do was put my yellow back out on my palette paper, take a wet brush, and just put it right back in to get that yellow back in. No problem, huh? So, there's one more step. Well, it's a double step. Took a fan brush. This is my preferred way of splattering. I took the titanium white fluid acrylic, put it out here on my palette. Really wet my fan brush, really wet so that it's nearly dripping, and set it in there so that we get really wet white paint. Stick it on here, and here's my secret. I use my index finger and I point my loaded fan brush where I want it to go, and then I take my palette knife and I tap and I spatter. See the spatter? It goes where you point your finger. Okay, and I'm going to take this in and rinse that white paint out of it. And I'm going to dip it into my Payne's Gray over here. I'm going to put it on my palette paper and go in and wet my brush again. And I'm going to spatter the Payne's Gray also. Okay, cool. Okay, we've got one more step. And I want to dry this off real quick. Dry my spatters. Now I have a laser printer, and I printed my my dragonflies on my laser printer. It will not work with an inkjet printer. You've got to have a laser copy. Okay, so I cut it out pretty close. The next thing I'm going to use is golden gel. Now her instructions say regular gel. Not heavy body and not soft, but I happen to have soft, so I decided to experiment and see if it would work. This is the fastest image transfer I have ever done. Usually it's let it dry overnight or let it dry for a couple hours and wet it down and all that stuff. Well, this is fast. So I'm taking my golden soft gel, putting it on my finger, and I'm rubbing it on the printed side. Woo. Covering every bit of it. This is messy. You'll get it on your hands, but it's okay. It washes off. Okay, so I got it covered. I'm going to stick it upside down on my coaster. I'm going to take an old credit card and I'm going to burnish it. Whoops, don't tear its head off. That's not a good sign. I'm going to burnish it like this. Well, shoot. Keep tearing it off, don't I? Gonna do that. So I guess I just have to, I can't do it holding it up. I've got to do it flat. And you do that for about 30 seconds. And like on this tailback here, I'm just going to have to just kind of mostly push because I don't want to separate it and move it off over here somewhere. So you do this for about 30 seconds. Now the tail I may have to do again because I think, yeah, I moved it. Didn't get the gel on it. So let me put that tail back on. Okay, there we go. Work with this tail a little more. Well, you know, looks like I may have to print the tail over again. But let's do the rest. I'm just going to start peeling the back of the paper off of it after only 30 seconds, guys. And look at this. The transfer is there. It's there. I'm going to keep rubbing it till all the paper is gone. Look how quickly that transferred. How cool is that? I still got some paper to take off of it, but how cool is that? So fast. I'm in love with this method. I like this. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of my paper off. Just dip my finger in some water and get the rest of it off. And I will do the tail again. But when I've done that, I'm going to set this aside to dry. Okay? So I have one more coaster. And then I did the edges and the back in the Payne's Gray. But before that, I sealed the wood so that the Payne's Gray wouldn't just soak all in. So I sealed it, and I used Deco Art Traditions sealer. You can use any that you want. So here I have my my dragonfly, and it's all dry and everything. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Deco Art Media Interference Violet. I'm going to put it out on my piece of palette paper. Comes out white. Let me show you. Where is it? There it is. It comes out white, but if you look close, you see that little violet shimmer. And I'm going to take my small filbert brush. This is a filbert brush. It's kind of flat, but with a rounded end. And dip it into my paint. There's my paint. Let me move the gel. I'm just going to dip it in, load my brush. I always pull a little pathway from the edge of the puddle. And then I'm going to paint this right on top of the dragonfly wings, and it gives us this beautiful transparent purple shimmer. And that's all. That's all you do to get this really cool looking coaster set. And I don't know, it looks a little bit fall kind of, or Halloween kind of, with the oranges and the black in it. But I would have this out all year round. I really would. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is when that interference paint dries, I'm going to cover every one of the surfaces with probably 3 to 4 coats, just, because this is a coaster, of Deco Arts Ultra Matte Varnish. Let me get that. I love this varnish. It's a matte look, and I think this needs to be matte. And it's very hard and very good. And that's it. And then you have this really cool looking coaster set. This design is designed by Cheryl Poulin. It was in the August 2013 Paintworks issue, or look her up on the internet. It's Poulin. If I can find a good link for you, I will post it on this blog as well. But I want to make sure that Cheryl Poulin gets credit for this fantastic design and technique. So I hope you had fun. See you next week.